my fellow Americans.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
Let me ask you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, your particular, there's 4 groups out there, and inspectors, you're the group you headed, anytime you are denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act on what they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions of relevant resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You have indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access.
Compelled. Well, okay, compelled. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the President now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the Major's. The Major's assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the President have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip, because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let them in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Rationality belongs to the cool observers, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith, and the naive faith of the proletarian requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which have to be provided by myth makers to keep the ordinary person on the right course.
That I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I was
you've
still
already
in
done.
Parliament...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans, right. You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. You get
NIH,
one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among animals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's let Dr. Fauci.
I have to, well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2. That's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well, wait a minute.
If it did come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now propagating, Senator, because if you look at the viruses that were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports, that were published in the literature, it is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those viruses caused it.
No one is molecularly.
Those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain-of-function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That is
you can't
not.
Get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
I'm not obfuscating the truth.
Senator
You are the
Paul's
one.
time is expired, but I will allow the witness to.
Let me just finish. I want everyone to understand that if you look at those viruses, and that's judged by qualified virologists and evolutionary biologists, those viruses are molecularly impossible to result
they are. No
in
one's saying those viruses
SARS-CoV-2.
caused the pandemic.
Senator Paul,
We're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were
They're not.
animal viruses that became more transmissible in human, and you funded it.
And you
won't admit the truth.
And you
Senator
implying
Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses who come before this committee to respond. Dr.
and you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individual. I totally resent
could
that.
have
And
been.
if anybody
It could
is
have been.
lying here, Senator, it is you.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everyone, to Redacted on this busy Tuesday. Nice to see all of you. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
And on this show, we seek the truth wherever it takes us, covering the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. And we are in the midst of like a crazy windstorm. A deep freeze is hitting Europe. So it's kind of, we're in a crazy storm session right now.
Yes, you may hear it. It sounds like the Wicked Witch is coming for our house. If we are blown away... That's our explanation.
Yeah. So this might blow you away. The stories we're going to cover on tonight's show, we're going to look at the World Economic Forum, but specifically Klaus Schwab. We're going to deep dive the history of this guy. And we're also going to look at some major news that happened today at the World Economic Forum, including Henry Kissinger, the man who basically created Klaus Schwab, his mentor, saying, hey, Ukraine should join NATO. He's walking it back. He says now Ukraine should join NATO, forget being separate from that. And there's a couple of other big bombshells from the World Economic Forum that we'll talk about as well.
Plus, is the gender ID bill the thing that will make Scotland break away from the UK?
What?
It is big fight there. It's them's fighting words. It's fighting time. We're going to tell you about how the UK pulled rank and revoked a gender ID bill and what that means. This means a lot.
Yeah, we're also going to look at the broken food system across the world, but specifically in the United States, and how big corporations basically lobby Washington to make sure that the food system stays crappy, and so that you rely on big pharma, medications, and stay basically fat and unhealthy. That's their goal. That's their mission. So more of that and this crazy windstorm.
I just wonder if you guys can hear this. It does feel.
Oh yeah, we totally can. Like I'm hearing it.
And I wonder. So I assume that our audience can hear it too.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Here we go.
Yikes.
Right.
Okay, that, and we've got some Twitter files.
Yeah.
So we're gonna huff and blow your house down.
So with that, Redacted starts right now. Welcome, everyone. Welcome into Redacted on this Tuesday. Good to see all of you on this windy, crazy Tuesday. Nice to see everyone on Rumble. We got like almost 8,000, 9,000 creeping up there on Rumble right now. Good to see all of you on Rumble and on YouTube as well. Nice to see all of you on this busy Tuesday. We've got a daily newsletter.
Yes, we do.
We publish it every day, so that means it's daily. And it's a lot of fun, and it's very informative, and we'd love for you to subscribe. Go to redacted.inc. Again, it's totally free to subscribe. It'll be delivered to your inbox first thing in the morning. It's a way for us to stay connected with you, so you get a great newsletter, plus we're able to stay connected with you, and again, it's free. Just got to confirm that email. They'll send a verification email, and just go there and confirm and verify it, and then tomorrow morning, first thing in the morning, you'll get the newsletter about 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We also have a community section. I'm going to tell you about our community where you can support for the price of a cup of coffee. If you want to support independent journalism, that's what we do here. You know, we're on a shoestring budget. We're on a bootstrap budget. So we are not CNN. We are not the Wall Street Journal. We are not the New York Times. You can come over here. And if you're on Rumble, you can click the join button to join our locals community. And we've got exclusive content, behind the scenes content, special videos and things that will not be published to the broader community. So if you are a subscriber, if you're a VIP, you can join the rebellion. And for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can get exclusive access to all of that great content. Again, redacted.inc is the place to go. Well, Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum is underway right now in Davos, Switzerland. The globalists meeting to decide how they will control you for the next decade or so of your life, or maybe even the next 100 years. But who is Klaus Schwab? The man that sits at the helm of the World Economic Forum, the WEF. Well, investigative journalist Johnny Vedmore has spent a long time investigating Klaus Schwab, and he joins me now. And Johnny, as we were talking here before the show, I mean, it's not just about Klaus Schwab. These tentacles are deep and they are wide. What made you start investigating Klaus Schwab?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Clayton. Me and my girlfriend Whitney, we were sitting around the coffee table in Chile, and we were looking for information on him. And Whitney said to me, "Why don't you investigate Klaus Schwab? You go back in the time through the elites of history. Why don't you look? Because there's nothing out there about him, which is in great contrast to what is now." And I feel that's really affected by the information I found, because everything had been scrubbed online, and that intrigues any investigative journalist. And I love going back through history. So I went back as far as I could. I started backwards from Schwab's in the past, because so much had been deleted. There's no point in going back through time. You have to start already in history and look at all of the Schwabs. So basically I spent 4 to 5 weeks just searching every Schwab in history in Germany and their ancestry. And I eventually found Klaus Schwab's ancestors, his father, his mother, his grandfather, and an amazing story surrounding it, an amazing story. Klaus Schwab, his father was Eugen Schwab, born 1898, and eventually, when he was older, he would work for a Nazi model company called Escher Weiss. And during the war, Escher Weiss would be central to the Nazi atomic bomb program. And so Klaus Schwab's father, who was managing director of the main factory in Ravensburg, was not only making submarine parts and aircraft parts for the Nazis, and potential atomic bomb casings for the Nazis as well. They were also making the large turbines that would power the heavy water hydroelectric dams that they normally built them for. It was the same way they enriched uranium for their type of process of atomic bomb making. And so he was a very important man, Eugen Schwab. Of course, the Nazis weren't successful. And when Klaus was growing up, Germany was being reconciled. It was trying to change its image to the rest of the world. They were trying to say, look at us, we're now kind, we got over it. And at the same time, America was kind of learning some of the tools that the Nazis had used. The American intelligence services were using some of those tools to kind of do the same tricks the Nazis were pulling in an attempt to fight communism. For a good aim, they were saying, we're going to fight back these Soviets. Before it, we need to get dirty. And they started, of course, we know Operation Paperclip. They started bringing people in. And there was lots of projects set up. And in 1950, there was a special project set up in Harvard called Kissinger's International Seminar. It was actually set up by William Yandell Elliott, a grandee of American politics, who basically had been advisor to 6 different presidents throughout his career, as a high-ranking CFR member, and he invented this seminar, which a newly graduated Kissinger was put in charge of, and it was about training young global leaders. And in 1965 or 64, Eugen Schwab, Klaus Schwab's father, would say to Klaus, the only place you're going to go to succeed in the world now is Harvard. And he went and got offered a place, because you didn't apply for Kissinger's International Seminar. You were often headhunted. You could apply, but only the best got in. And they were looking for the best potential young leaders. And Klaus Schwab, in 1965, joined the ranks of Kissinger's International Seminar, which he graduated in 1967, and was a CIA-funded course. On the year Klaus Schwab graduated in 1967, Humphrey Dorman of Harvard released preempting releases in the New York Times and another newspaper of the information that the Kissinger's International Seminar had been funded between 1960 and 1966 by the CIA through American Friends of the Middle East, which was set up by Kermit Roosevelt, the Farfield Foundation, and the Asian Foundation. Wow. So Klaus Schwab had just gone through a CIA-funded course in Harvard. He was given, during that course, two mentors, one really fantastically interesting and important people in history, one being Herman Kahn, who's described as a real Dr. Strangelove, and is a guy you want to explore in detail, and John Kenneth Galbraith, another grandee of American politics, who was the teacher of JFK. JFK made him ambassador to India, wanted him to be ambassador to the Soviet Union. So, saw him in that sort of, held him in that sort of regard. And John Kenneth Galbraith has one of the most amazing histories around. And John Kenneth Galbraith, along with Otto von Habsburg, would become the keynote speakers in the First World Economic Forum, which was basically pushed forward by John Kenneth Galbraith and Herman Kahn, this team that had been given to Schwab through Harvard by Kissinger. They went back to get support for this new creation of what was a European Management Symposium that would 2 years later become the European Management Forum, and in the during the fall of the Soviet Union, it would become the World Economic Forum, which would show its true face. And so that's a course that Klaus Schwab went through. Now, in 1967, when he finished that course, he went back, and before they set up the World Economic Forum, he went back to work for his father's old company, Escher Weiss. Peter Schmidheiny, the CEO then, whose father had been Jacob Schmidheiny, had been the CEO while Eugen Schwab had been at Escher Weiss, phoned up Klaus Schwab, and Peter Schmidheiny said, hey, we've got a merger going on between Sulzer AG, Brown Boveri, Escher Weiss. We're merging them into a new company, and we want you at the helm. And what did Klaus Schwab do? He becomes second in charge of this merger and of these companies, and then the companies started selling illegally weapons technology, nuclear weapon technology, to the South African apartheid regime, so they could make bombs, which they made 6 bombs complete. They never tested their bombs. They made 6 complete nuclear bombs, with a 7th that was basically being constructed when they finally dismantled the program. This all came out in Swiss courts as well, so this is all documented in evidence. And this is what Klaus Schwab was at them. He did exactly the same as his father. His father helped a racist Nazi regime to try and create the atomic bomb to win World War II. And Klaus Schwab went on afterwards with his father's, pushing it on from behind to do exactly the same thing with South Africa. And Klaus Schwab then, over years, Harvard, the project, the Kissinger's International Seminar, once exposed, kind of like sort of crumbled into the sea. Kissinger went off to serve in Nixon's cabinet, eventually getting into high levels and being responsible for some of the most amazing moments throughout history. Kissinger is a really interesting person in this. He's really important, and he stayed in the background, but in the 80s he started to get back involved with the World Economic Forum, showed his face. The World Economic Forum, really interesting at the start, because it started off, it had a really big, had these big names to open up the actual opening of the European Management Symposium. And then the second year stumbled a bit, and the third year they got in limits of growth. They got in the Club of Rome. Aurelio Pecci was the keynote speaker just after they had written this, the limits to growth, which basically said, and he said it within the speech, that the enemy of humanity would be man itself in the future. And of course, we know that later on, Klaus Schwab in the 90s started up the Global Leaders for Tomorrow program with the World Economic Forum when it rebranded. That was the start of recreating Kissinger's International Seminar. Jeez. And by 2004, the Dan David Foundation gave Schwab a $1 million prize, said, hey, have this prize that we give every year for all your hard work, do with it what you will. And he said, with this money, I'm going to make the Young Global Leaders Forum, so that we can base the Forum for Young Global Leaders, where we can industrially train global leaders that can then penetrate the cabinets, etc. Now, on the board of the Dan David Foundation, when they gave him this prize money to set up the Young Global Leaders, was, of course, Henry Kissinger. And it's just a cycle that goes round in a circle. Schwab recreated Henry Kissinger's International Seminar, which the German Marshall Fund, based at Harvard, from another Kissinger protege, Guido Goldman, had also run loads of leadership courses in between, but they hadn't had the same sort of impact that Kissinger's International Seminar Seminar had. Kissinger's International Seminar produced Pierre Trudeau, Klaus Schwab, and Valéry Giscard of France, the president of France, Japanese president, and Israeli prime minister. I mean, it really was a case that Kissinger's International Seminar was the gold standard of courses, and Klaus Schwab is the number one protege of Henry Kissinger.
And funded in part and starting out with the CIA. So, I mean, I think people have a right to be scared of this guy, right? I mean, you look at this family lineage here, you look at the money, you look at the influence, you look at the people who were funding and making sure that he was being guided in a certain way. It almost sounds like he didn't have any choice in this. Like, his dad, here's where you're going to be. You're going to be selected for this. You're going to carry out our mission. And this just goes absolutely deep. So over the past few years, a lot of people have grown increasingly scared of this guy, myself included, what he is up to. I guess it's a weird question for me to ask, but do we have a right to be scared of this guy and what his agenda is doing, what they're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, he's a very clever, because what people don't understand is why they should be really afraid. They can't really get it together. He looks like a Bond villain. They've made him almost comically like a Bond villain, so that everybody can say, "Oh, it's just Klaus Schwab again. Look, Dr. No and or Dr. Evil and Dr. No and all of those different things." But the thing is about the World Economic Forum, the reason why it's so powerful and important is not only because it creates all of these young global leaders, but it creates policies that everything relies on. It's the leading policy think tank, and they line up alongside with Edelman PR, and Edelman PR are the number one PR firm in the world. They handle marketing and PR for 60-70% of all companies, all governments, all everything. These guys are the globalists. They want to create something that is like a prison for us all, that is the same all the way around the world. Now, why they want to do it is partially because of, and it's in line with why Klaus Schwab rose to the top. When you've got Klaus Schwab's ability, when you're able to learn like Klaus Schwab has, he's a very intelligent man, especially in his youth. When you're able to go through all of these courses, get degree after degree, there's only a limited number of jobs that fit you, and there's a load of headhunters for those jobs. So there's only a very precise. This is what's happening now. We, the underclass, will have to do all of the main work, but these guys at the top, they raise themselves up in a separate system, and they create a separate system. So we should be worried, because this is a two-tier system that is happening in front of our eyes. We're coming to the end of something within capitalism that they all know about. The end of Pareto distribution, at the end of all of the wealth going to one area and being held by a certain group of people and everybody else not having wealth. That's communism. Capitalism ends in communism. Capitalism's death ends in this communitarian. And this is what they've done. What I think people like Kissinger and Schwab and others have done, Kahn, Galbraith, all of these people throughout history who have shaped this world that we're living in now, is they've looked at what works best throughout each ideology, what works best in fascism, what works best in communism, what works best in capitalism, what works best in normal democratic society. Take little bits out of it that suits them and mash them all together and amalgamate them into something that can cover the entire world and keep us all in chains. And they've done a very good job of this. So it smells of everything. Everybody said this. You've got a load of people who will say it's communism, and a load of people who will say it's something else. But this is some sort of technocratic merging of all of the lessons these people have learned from the past.
And it drives down to all of us. And it drives. This is the monster, and you're right. It is not. He looks like a comic book character. He looks like a Bond villain, but it's incredibly nefarious. And I think the biggest complaint that I hear from my viewers night after night after night is that these people are unelected. Right? These are unelected globalists, billionaires, whomever, who are in this inner circle. Heck, we have Brian Stelter, formerly of CNN, now joining the World Economic Forum. We have Edelman PR, as you pointed out. We have MasterCard, the head of the banking systems, are all there. These are unelected people who are driving these policies. And for the people watching our show, there's like a desperation there. Like, what can we do to stop this? What can we do? And I think maybe, and that's probably part of your investigative journalism here, sitting down with Whitney Webb, and you guys are sitting there saying, they're making him disappear off the internet. Things are disappearing. it's important for us, I think, as journalists to shine a light on this. Is that maybe where this starts, shining a light on this dark side?
Yeah, there's two things. One thing is the more they hide, the more they delete, the more they censor, the longer our articles become, because the more there is to talk about. And that then wakes more people up, and you can't go back to sleep once you've woken up. So you've got this element where they're reaching the pinnacle of their power. They're getting to the point where they will get no higher than this. They will drop away afterwards. I think they were at about 60-70%, and they've got a lot of hubris, a lot of what they believe, how they believe they're going to win this. The globalists, these technocrats, they got a lot of hubris, but that's kind of built into the system. Civilization works in cycles, and they know that, and they're not stupid. They don't ignore things like that. And eventually an old Klaus Schwab, who's now 86, 87 years old, is going to die, and we're going to need a new savior. And all of these people over here then, who have got this evil looking corporation that's the World Economic Forum, they'll look even more evil. People will lose interest in them, and something else will rise up, something else that has been created by exactly the same people. I think personally that we're seeing that change happen now, and I think we should be worried about the World Economic Forum, but we got to understand that there's the new technocrats and neo-technocrats are coming, people like Elon Musk who are raising up.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the next wave.
I think you're right, and I think we will see a new, we see the guest list already dwindling this time around for this most recent World Economic Forum, but I think in some ways it's like a hydra, and we'll start to see these things popping up in other ways.
It's built that way.
It's built that way on purpose, you say?
Yeah, it's built that way. I mean, they're not stupid. Kissinger had multiple backup plans for everything that he did. So the whole, and it's not just Kissinger. We talk about Kissinger, but really what we're talking about is all of the efforts of the CFR being manifest through a human being, and that is Kissinger. So Kissinger is like a hydra. He's all these different people who are powerful behind the scenes, who have all these different interests, all mushing their interests together into one person who's going to enact that into policy, and then create like lots of different proteges and different followers and apprentices to enact these different parts of everything. It's created like that, we may focus on one person at some times, but this isn't like one big scary shark as in Jaws. This is a load of different sharks all over the place. They're circling you. When one goes, another will pop up. That is life. It's been that way since the dawn of time. I doubt that's going to change.
Fascinating. Johnny, I want to have you back and do a deep dive redacted conversations about Klaus Schwab and all of the tentacles of this. We just touched on some of it here and some of the brief history, but that's scary enough. I mean, the CIA influence, the Nazi influence, all of these pieces, really, really terrifying. Johnny, thank you so much for your great research. Give our best to Whitney Webb as well. We're all big fans of the work that you've done and that she's doing currently as well. So thank you so much, Johnny. We really appreciate you joining us.
No, thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Johnny. And so this is crazy when you think about how deep this goes, right? You think about this afternoon, we literally have Henry Kissinger at the World Economic Forum influencing policy once again. So the mentor becomes the mentee. No, is that the right way to say this? I mean, Klaus Schwab is literally Henry Kissinger's mentee.
Yes, that's
and
what he said.
He's at his World Economic Forum saying that Ukraine should now join NATO. Like this is what's happening right now inside. This happened just at the World Economic Forum this afternoon.
Okay. I mean, it does feel like fiction. And when he said it's meant to be that way, you wonder, is it fiction, modeling life or the other way around? Because it's
that you cut off the Hydra head and it continues to grow, and it doesn't matter really who's at the helm of it. And of course, we're seeing, I've watched some of the sessions today at the World Economic Forum, and you're seeing dwindling numbers there. So when you had one of the heads of Spain speaking, there was very few people in the room. Like half of the room was empty. Journalists are being kept away. Rebel News this afternoon getting kicked out.
Do you think it's just now that it's a bad look to even go? to Davos? Because it used to be the coolest thing for the coolest kids.
Well, if you mean by cool, it was like if you got to go and be a part of the CNBC or the Bloomberg set and you were covering and interviewing Bill Gates and all of this garbage.
Well, it once was a signal of prestige, and now it's sort of a signal of abuse of power.
Yeah.
And so I think that more people are just not wanting to show up because it shows that they are wielding unelected power.
Yeah. Go ahead, David.
Well, was it ever something that got blocked on social media, or and because Twitter is so open now, there's more light being brought to what's going on there? Or because I don't remember if that's something that they ever blocked, but I'm just curious if that's why it didn't get the steam that it has now for people not wanting to go, because it was blocked and silenced, but now it's actually, being
I feel like
on Twitter.
There just maybe is people awakening to this type of thing. Like my sister said, she's been following the Bilderbergs for a long time, and that used to be the conversation of people who were more conspiracy theorists. But now that is a widely accepted, I don't know how widely, but it is more accepted tenet that unelected leaders do get together and make decisions that are based only for themselves.
Yeah, I think the social media question is interesting, right? Because if you look at Twitter, you can certainly see these sessions being shared out. They're being shared out by the WEF, and then other people are resharing them, and they're just commenting on them, and specifically some of these sessions that have been half empty. Now, eagle-eyed observers are saying, well, the reason that they're half empty is because they're not publicly meeting in these spaces. They're having secret meetings. So the stuff that you're seeing there with the television cameras, that's just for show. That's just for CNBC cameras. The real meetings are happening behind closed doors. Absolutely the case.
And I do try and watch some of the live streams for this. I sort of keep it on while I'm doing other research. And mostly it's people, saying how great they are and how they want to do, beneficial things that are, malevolent for the world. And they think these, no one's like, we don't get a lot of underground secret stuff. We know it happens, but it's not for us to see.
But we do get some interesting moments like this afternoon, the Henry Kissinger piece, but also we heard Senator Kyrsten Sinema and Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia on stage at the World Economic Forum saying, Joe Manchin specifically saying that he doesn't basically believe in the First Amendment. Basically, and both of them high-fiving at one point, both senators high-fiving, saying they will not get rid of the filibuster. So, of course, they're going to continue to torpedo legislation that would help the American people, and they're going to high-five about that in front of that audience. So we get some of these moments. But anyway, we're going to do a deeper dive. I'm going to have Johnny back on. We're going to go more deeply into this. What's up?
Which part of the First Amendment do they have a problem with? The whole thing, or just the freedom of the press part?
Like the freedom of the press part, I think.
I think it's more the freedom of your speech.
Yes.
As government is now been shown guilty of collaborating with social media in order to curb your own thought and discussion about questions about government action. I think they don't think you have the right to challenge them.
Yeah, but
we're idiots. I mean,
we are. You are the proletariat. You cannot speak. You cannot, have a thought, and so therefore you should not be allowed to have free speech. And we're going to censor and do whatever we can to it. But I think bottom line, the biggest takeaway so far from today, and of course this Klaus Schwab connection with Henry Kissinger, is Henry Kissinger announcing that Ukraine should, that NATO should shed its resistance to joining NATO. So we should have, basically Ukraine joining NATO, and that would mean World War III fully, because it would immediately invoke the powers of NATO to come in and protect it.
Yes, yeah. Plus, you're in Europe, and Europe, they don't bypass applications. You need all the paperwork. Europeans love bureaucracy. So if that were to happen, that would be a miracle.
We've got a lot more news to get to here on this Tuesday, on this Taco Tuesday. I hope everyone is doing well. We're going to look at the Scottish gender bill because there was a huge fight in the UK Parliament this afternoon. We were watching it live. We're going to bring you the details of that craziness because, wow, could this really lead to Scotland?
Scott exit,
ripping out of
That's not good. We need a different moniker for that.
Skexit?
Nope.
I don't know. Let us know in the chat. What should the Scottish exit of the UK be called since we had Brexit?
Glasgowing?
Glasgowing.
Glasgow. I like that.
Or no, that didn't work. That's not good.
And we're also going to look, we have a special interview. Callie Means is going to be joining us. Of course, he's the whistleblower that broke the story about Coca-Cola lobbying the NAACP, trying to get the soda included in food stamps program and labeling it racist, the soda tax. Unbelievable stories we've got lined up for you on tonight's show. But first, I want to tell you about our friend over at Lear Capital, because it's no secret. Like if you're tuned in, then you know experts are predicting a recession. It's coming, okay? We just heard from Peter Schiff. We heard from a number of other economists who are seeing really troubling data, specifically in the labor market, but more broadly about recession numbers and the supply chain. So last year was terrible for most investors. 2023 could be the worst year ever for the U.S. dollar. It could be worse with talks of bad recession. That is, unless you were smart and you invested in gold or you invested in precious metals, gold, silver, precious metals. If experts are right and we get hit with this recession, 2023 is looking even better for gold investors. Now, what we want to do is basically show you how you can actually get helpful information, a free gold kit right now, a free investor guide to see if it's right and it fits for your portfolio. And if you would like to be able to convert part of your IRA or your 401k over to gold and silver, all you need to do, you see that 800 number right there on your screen, you can call Lear Capital at 1-800-613-3557, or you can go to learredacted.com. There are a lot of gold companies to choose from, but Lear Capital is one of the best. I trust them because they have 25 years experience and thousands of 5-star reviews and a risk-free guarantee that gives you 24 hours to review your purchase before committing to it. So you want to buy a certain number of ounces of gold or silver, and then you go to bed that night, you think, maybe I don't want to do that, I'd rather be in the stock market. Then you cancel the order. It doesn't really matter. You've got 24 hours to make that decision before you purchase. So fantastic. Anyway, call Lear Capital today, 1-800-613-3557, or go to learredacted.com and get your free gold and silver investors guide. And you can receive up to $15,000 in free bonus metals with a qualified purchase when you work with them. So call right now, 1-800-613-3557, or go to learredacted.com. We'll have links in the description below.
All right, well, we're going to talk about the Scottish gender bill, because guess what? It took a man to realize that it was a violation of women's rights. We did not see this happening with woman Nicola Sturgeon, who's the Prime Minister of Scotland. She pushed this through all last year. The bill became signed into law, or was voted into law in December. But now the United Kingdom has said it will challenge this and not allow it to come into law. This is the first time that the UK has blocked a law in Scotland from becoming law, and they're mad as snakes about it. This is the gender ID bill that we've been discussing, and it was hotly protested by feminists, but still passed in December. The law would make it easier for people to change their legally recognized gender. So mostly this is about birth certificates, but birth certificates which will give someone access into a different sexed space. The age to do this will drop from 16 to 18 years old. Why is that contentious? Why that 2 years do they absolutely need? Anybody? Any reasons for this?
Well, now they're not an adult, so you mean to tell me that they have gender dysphoria, they're that young, and they don't need a parent's approval?
And they don't need a doctor's approval. This will no longer require a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria. So you don't have to have been seen by a specialist. You don't have to have presented as this gender for any given time. You just literally tomorrow can go and change your legally recognized sex. Less bureaucratic,
I always get so irritated with this narrative, because it's like, remembering my childhood, there were times I thought I was John from Chips. I thought I was Spider-Man. So at any point, if I would have thought that I was having, what would that be? Hero dysphoria? They would have changed my whole being to revolve around that. I mean, it's the same thing. You have kids going through stages, and that should be embraced, but not saying, I guess you're not this gender.
But we're talking about two finite choices, male and female, right? And so you always, as a child, understood that there were these two things, but there are a myriad of professions, if we're going to call superheroes a profession.
Well, I guess, but I didn't as a child, like that would never be a focus. Like I didn't focus on gender. I didn't really, I liked girls or whatever, but I didn't look at it as because it was a girl. It was just a feeling that I had. I didn't there was no reason for gender to even be in my mind at that age.
Yes, but gender, we've talked many times about how there is a growing social component to this that makes people, I was listening to a therapist talk about this recently, and she said that a lot of times these young kids, they are not fantasizing, but they're sort of playing with academic terms around gender as, what's the word that I used for it? It's like, it's not an affectation. They are...
Like role-playing?
They're sort of role-playing academics, having not actually read the canon of academia, but throwing around these academic terms to validate what they think is then a progressive and accepting way to be, not understanding that it's actually not a progressive and accepting way to be. So for instance, if you're a therapist, if I'm a therapist and you come to me and say, I really want to live my life as a woman and I'm going to take these steps to do it, and I say, okay, let's go ahead and do that, then we are going to have to collectively agree that the goal of your life now is passing as a different gender, and that's going to be really stinking hard on you and your psyche, because I'm just looking at you right now and I'm thinking you're going to need shoulder surgery, which is now a thing that they shave off parts of their shoulders to have a more feminine body frame. You're going to have to do something about the stubble because Clayton shaves and then an hour later has a 5 o'clock shadow.
I'm a werewolf.
You're going to have to do something about those really aggressive eyebrows you've got.
Really aggressive.
Yeah. In fact, when I was pregnant with our
Stop
first
it, you're
child.
scaring me. You're scaring me. Quit it. Leave me alone.
When I was
Leave me
pregnant
alone.
with
Stop
our
it,
first
Clayton.
child, my mom said, do you think the baby's going to have those eyebrows?
My eyebrows are offending you. They're so aggressive.
But
it's a microaggression, my eyebrows.
My point is that you are going to have to obsess about what other people think of you and your appearance. And I don't know any therapist that would say, let's sign you up for this. You're going to obsess about your appearance and you're going to worry about constantly having social acceptance. Great idea. This is what I've signed you up for.
So this is why the United Kingdom, the UK government in Britain, stepping in and saying, whoa, wait a second. Wait a second on this bill. And they put together this 57-page, blockage bill to stop this from happening in Scotland.
And so you might think, oh, well, making life easier for transgender people, that would be nice, right? But it also means, one, that we should not agree that this would make their lives easier, because again, you're telling someone, okay, then you obsess about, passing for a different gender. Instead of what's going on there, let's help you. Right, having to obsess about your appearance. And there's a lot of anxiety that goes along with that. That's one. But two, what about single-sex spaces? Now, there would be no single-sex spaces if someone like J.K. Rowling, who recently opened a domestic abuse shelter for biological women only, and if somebody were to come in with this birth certificate and say, I'm a woman, and she said, and people at this shelter say, no, you're not. And they say, well, I have the paperwork. You have to let me in here.
Right. And then
that's extremely problematic.
And then, of course, she was labeled transphobic as a result of it.
Yes.
And there was all this backlash around the Harry Potter thing. Just as a side note, if I may, I was listening to a podcast where they were talking about the new Harry Potter Hogwarts game that's coming out.
Oh,
right?
yes.
And there's this big boycott. Right. There's people who are like, oh, no, that money's going to go to J.K. Rowling. She's going to make money off of the Hogwarts game. Right. Well, that's blown up because now pre-orders are off the charts. It's going to be it's blown up in these people's faces. But the point is, when they were talking about it, they're like, well, what's the story behind this game? And J.K. Rowling, and why are people boycotting it? And the guy said, oh, because she made some transphobic comments, and now people I'm like, no, actually she did not.
They're not
transphobic
comments. She wants to protect single-sex spaces for women.
But there's so much ignorance about what she said that it became very easy to say she's transphobic. No, she didn't. She wants women to be able to have single-sex spaces.
In fact, I follow a TRA account, like a feed of stuff, which is trans rights activists, and one person was saying that they were super depressed that Simon Pegg had voiced, I think it's RAB, Regulus Black. RAB.
Okay.
So anyway, he's the voice of Regulus, and they're like, oh no, he participated. Simon Pegg, now we have to hate him.
Give me a break.
Because he participated in a J.K. Rowling related
Hogwarts game
program. Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Well, and you know what's really sad about this whole thing is the reason that she is J.K. Rowling is because the publishing company didn't think the people would take a book like that written by a female seriously. So they put it as J.K. so people would assume she was a man. So she should be held up to she did that for women. Like that was a huge accomplishment for women. So she should be proud of that.
Okay, so let's get to this. You didn't know that?
No,
yeah.
I didn't.
I think her name is Joanna, right? Joanna.
I believe so.
So let's get to the fight as it relates to UK versus Scotland, because it's kind of fun to watch, I'm going to say. This is the first time, again, that the UK has blocked a law that Scotland voted into effect because it affects UK law. Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack says that he is doing this due to concerns on how the law would impact operation of Great Britain-wide equalities legislation. He's saying that this law could affect the rights to, say, run a single-sex club. For instance, a lesbian club. You can't have a lesbian club anymore if I can change my gender just to get in. Then you have men there saying, you really do want a man, you're not a lesbian. Associations, schools, single-sex schools, as well as equal pay for men and women. He says he would entertain an amended bill in the future. Nicola Sturgeon, though, the Prime Minister of Scotland, is furious. She says this is a full frontal attack on Scottish Parliament. The sort of like sexual suggestion of that full frontal, I feel like there's something there that I can't quite. I can't make a joke with it.
You can't reach out and grab it.
Like I want
to go the full Monty.
The full Monty, do it. Right? I can't get there to make a joke of it, but I'm like, oh, but we're talking about female anatomy, and you just said full frontal. You make that joke yourself, because I am unable. She also says that it will have a significant impact on protections contained in UK equalities. And she said Scotland will mount a legal challenge to this. So how big will that challenge be? Will they fight just the bill, or will they sort of say, well, you're not the boss of me, I'm out of here, run away like a child who is told to do something? I mean, I don't want to say she's being childish, but you see the analogy that I'm making here is like when your daddy says, oh, yes, you'll follow my rules as long as you live under my house, then there's motivation there to no longer live under my house. And will they then do something? There is a second referendum working its way through Scottish government. No one really expected it to go very far, but maybe. Do you want to play the video you brought about the infighting?
This was this afternoon, of course, the Parliament and the debate inside of Parliament back and forth, and it got pretty heated. I mean, there was some throwdown. There was a lot of throwing back and forth. So yeah, you had Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack saying that these concerns, this law should, of course, be blocked. Right? There's others saying no, we should let this go forward. This is Scottish, and this is the independence of Scotland. Don't you respect the democracy of Scotland? So here was some of this debate this afternoon. Watch.
I was making the point that democracy matters and that this UK government is seeking to consistently ignore Scotland's democracy. I mentioned the right to strike, and of course I mentioned the EU retained law bill. But it's also true in respect of Brexit as a whole. 72% of Scots want to rejoin the European Union, yet this UK government, and indeed this Labour Party, have absolutely no interest in that position whatsoever. Of course I will.
I know he's not had an opportunity to look at the statement of reasons, because it's 57 paragraphs of which you've just been served up. I've had a quick chance to have a look at this. And can I say to my honourable friend, maybe not bother having a look at this in any great detail, because it's specious, it's hypothetical and it's poorly informed. And one example of that, Mr. Speaker, is on equal pay. You seem to believe that a trans man would take advantage of the opportunity to be paid less. It's the type of rubbish that's included in this. What do you think of that?
Mr. Speaker, I've not obviously had the opportunity to look at that myself, but if that is the case, it is a complete and utter embarrassment. And it shows that just as this Secretary of State was unprepared today in relation to this matter, so too is his government in relation to the arguments that they are putting forward. I'm a little bit embarrassed for them.
Yeah.
But it speaks to the idea.
Someone in the chat was asking, what language were they speaking? That was English.
It does speak to the idea of, it has. What the worry is, not that transgender people will abuse this, but that other people who are not trans will use it to gain access to spaces that make people unsafe. But then also the idea that a trans man would self-select into an abused group and take lesser pay to make them more authentically, I guess, of that group. Or a trans woman would, no, because it's women who are, I'm sorry, I misused. It's a trans woman who would self-select into an oppressed group in order to authenticate their participation in that group. It speaks to academics who are saying this, that sometimes this is used by people who are not of an oppressed group to self-select in. I do want to point out that Nicola Sturgeon does not have unanimous support for this gender ID bill. Here she is being shouted down last fall at a conference on women's rights, no less, for her refusal to actually preserve women's rights. Take a look.
Shame on you. You fermented this culture in Scotland that basically tells women are bigoted for standing up for women's rights. I see you, and thousands of women around Scotland see you as well. And those of you who are sitting here complicit, keeping your mouths shut while women have actually been raped by males who have self-ID'd as women. And that's got nothing to do with trans rights. And I support trans rights and have done for 3 decades now, and I'll continue to.
Now, I want to point out that all of this fighting is not what TRAs want. Trans rights activists, they do better when they fly under the radar and sneak these laws into existence like they did in Ireland. That absolutely happened. Ireland went from having no provision for changing legal sex to allowing anyone to do it for any purpose by printing out a form, writing their name, signing in a form, and no fee. And then you just send it by post with your original birth certificate and you get it right back. The UK did not have the opportunity to stop this bill in Ireland, but they are taking the opportunity to do this. But also it wasn't public. And so fighting about this and pointing out how this makes women's spaces unsafe, and when pushed on how do you make sure that dangerous males don't use this to self-select into women's spaces, her response has basically been, well, when they, attack a woman, we'll know that they're abusing it. So then let's wait for that to happen, and then we'll know that someone has so that makes women bait.
Right.
Or cannon fodder. That doesn't make sense. Now, it turns out that when the Irish law was put into place, that was done very secretive. In fact, take a look at this excerpt from Helen Joyce's book, that in 2019, Dentons, the world's largest law firm, published a report it had prepared pro bono for this network of LGBT organizations in Europe. And it was titled Only Adults, Good Legal Practices and Legal Gender Recognition for Youth. And it argued for the right to change one's legal sex at any age, without parental consent. So 7 totally fine. It acknowledged that this would be unpopular with the public, but other unpopular trans rights policies had already become law, they explained, citing gender self-ID in Ireland. And it recommended linking such proposals with unrelated ones that commanded broad support. In Ireland, it said self-ID had been brought in cover of same-sex marriage. So they sort of slip it in and make sure that we don't argue about it and that the public barely knows. It advised on staying out of the news. Irish trans activists had direct lobbied individual politicians and tried to keep press to a minimum. So the fact that we're even discussing this is because most voters say, yes, I want trans people to have rights, to exist, to be happy, to whatever, but I don't want to destroy women's rights in the meantime. I don't want to, make it so lesbians have no more safe spaces. I don't want to make it so that my daughters have nowhere to change with only biological women around them. But if we sort of slip these laws under the radar, it works to their advantage, and that's not what they're getting here. They're getting actually a real fight.
Where's the argument for equal rights? I mean, that's what they should be fighting for, equal. And it's like Ron Paul always said, you cannot take rights away from other people and give them to other people and expect there not to be some kind of fight. You just start putting people in groups, and you have to do things by the individual. Individual rights are what matter, because if I have a right, then the trans person has the same right. So it's like, that's a more fair system. And my main takeaway from that Parliament thing is, if you are going to transition, get a job as a man first, then transition.
Right.
So that you get the
higher pay. Yeah, you get the corner office, you get the great light, the sunshine.
Well, that begs the question that if there's equal right to public toilets, let's say, equal right to public spaces that involved changing or using the bathroom or what have you, why is the argument not a third space for people who are not binary?
Well, that's what I've been saying for a long time.
And the reason is because it's not about access to the space. For many TRAs, it's about validation. It's about the fact that I want you to see me as this legitimate gender, even though your biology is such that we are meant to instinctively distinguish gender. They don't want that. So, again, it's an interesting question about how big of a fight this will become, UK versus Scotland. Will it be another, I had to bring it, you guys. If we're talking about UK having their independence, I had to bring you this image. So,
a lot of people in the chat asking, like, where's William Wallace when you need him?
Interestingly enough, in the town of Sterling,
where an American actor when you need him.
Yeah, no, he's Australian.
I think you mean Susan Wallace.
He's Australian.
He's Australian.
I think he's half Australian and half American. And interestingly enough, when you go to the town of Sterling and see the castle where he waged his crusades, the images there in the gift shop are of Mel Gibson's face, because they don't have any images of William Wallace. They really don't know what he looks like, and he is now the recognizable archetype for this freedom. So we remains to be seen. We'd like to know what you have to say about this. Will this mean that Scotland breaks off on its own? Will it get this big? What will happen?
And if it does, are they going to change it to Wilma Wallace?
That's right.
That's a good one.
Like that.
Very good.
We've got more news to get to here on this Taco Tuesday. We've got a whistleblower joining us in just a few moments to tell you about the food supply in the United States. Of course, the food supply in the United States is under attack from a couple of different angles. Number one, from actual eco-terrorists who've been blowing up different food processing plants over the past year and a half. So what is going on with that? That's not what this story is about, though. This story is about the biopharmaceutical complex and these large corporations intentionally keeping us sick, fat, and dying so that they can make a lot of money off of the processed food and the seed oils. But we've got a whistleblower who is blowing the roof off the dump about how this whole thing operates. So wait until you hear that. And we're also going to talk about the Twitter files, because we've got the new Twitter files on Pfizer and Moderna, specifically censoring Americans. So we're going to go through the very latest batch of all of that in just a few moments.
But first, we'd like to tell you about our friends over at Ghost Bed. There's nothing better than a great night of sleep, and sleeping on a mattress that's designed for your particular sleeping style can really be heaven. That's why we are excited to partner with Ghost Bed. They are a family-owned business that's been designing mattresses and other sleep products for more than 2 decades. They know that sleep is personal and mattress shopping can be overwhelming. Ghost Bed takes the guesswork out of the equation with their online mattress style quiz. Answer a few questions about your lifestyle and sleeping style, and they'll recommend the right Ghost Bed mattress for you. And you get a 101-night sleep trial with free returns for added peace of mind, and shipping is fast and free. Plus, all Ghost Bed mattresses are proudly made in the USA. For a limited time only, our listeners can get 30% off Ghost Bed mattresses plus 2 luxury pillows, or get 40% off when you bundle a mattress with their award-winning adjustable base. Use promo code REDACTED at ghostbed.com/redacted to take advantage of that offer. Again, that's ghostbed.com/redacted, and use our offer code REDACTED.
Well, now to the obesity epidemic. Instead of treating the problem with healthier eating, the United States turning to big pharma to solve its problems. Not surprising. Let me read this stunning new headline. This is one of those headlines that just had my jaw hit the floor. I thought it was like a fake Onion article or a Babylon Bee article, but no, it's real. Here it is. Children struggling with obesity should be evaluated and treated early and aggressively, including with medications for kids as young as 12 and surgery for those as young as 13, according to new guidelines released on Monday. Joining me now is a whistleblower who was in the room where it happened. He watched as Coca-Cola lobbied Congress with millions of dollars to make sure soda was included in the food stamps program. It's part of America's healthy eating program. And now he's blowing the whistle on corruption. Callie Means is the founder of TrueMed, and he joins me now. Callie, welcome to the show. You have an amazing story. I want to get into the Coca-Cola side of this and your history there. But first, just your reaction to these new guidelines being rolled out this week.
I think every parent should be absolutely aghast. I don't know when it became a political virtue to blindly trust pharma companies, but the fact that there's an obesity epidemic among preteens, right? And the answer is a lifelong injection. This is on the FDA label. This is a lifelong injection, getting 12-year-olds addicted to pharma and injection. There's this gaslighting going on. 60 Minutes ran a shameful piece. 75% of their advertising comes from pharma. And they said that there's limited side effects. According to the reports, it's 75% of people who get this injection have gastrointestinal issues. Just one quick note on that. 95% of our serotonin, which regulates our happiness and entire mental state, is produced in the gut. So there's already reports of mass depression increase from getting this injection, and we're putting 12-year-olds on. The last thing I'll just say real quickly, and this ties into the food thing, is it's really just a devil's bargain between food and healthcare in this country. Obesity, prediabetes among young adults is now 25%. Obesity or diabetes or prediabetes among adults is now 50%. 93% of the country's metabolic dysfunctional. This is because of our food system, which we can talk about. And then pharma, instead of talking about those factors, instead of talking about the underlying factors that are making Americans sick, they're creating these miracle cures that, I think we know how that's going to go.
Can you talk about this injection? So this idea, you have a 12-year-old who's got 10, 15 pounds of extra body weight on. And the government is saying, okay, instead of eating, organic ground beef or other fresh foods, living a healthy lifestyle, getting out and exercising, we'd rather partner up with Big Pharma and give you an injection. What does this injection do? Like, what does this do to the young?
The mechanism is it suppresses appetite. So you might eat a little bit less, but I think this is a core point. If a child is eating inflammatory, bad food and living a sedentary lifestyle, That's not changing. That inflammatory food, their diet, is coming into their body. They're not learning not to eat, massive
seed
amounts
oils,
of added sugar, seed oils, processed grains, which is the foundation of the diet, which, again, the government and a crony capitalist scheme subsidizes inexplicably tens of billions of dollars. So even if you're eating a little bit less, which I'm questioning whether that even will work long term, because all drugs wear off and this is a lifetime drug, you're still, that child is eating inflammatory foods. And I think this is actually an important trend to note with pharma. The more drugs we prescribe for certain chronic conditions, the more those conditions go up. The more statins we've prescribed, the more heart disease goes up. The more metformin we've prescribed, the more diabetes has gone up. The more SSRIs we've prescribed, 25% of the country of the United States is now on a mental health medication. The more depression, suicide has gone up. I will guarantee you that long term, this drug will not decrease obesity because it creates a moral hazard. Parents and children think that they're doing something, but they're not. You are not going to outsmart and outhack the underlying physiology of the body. And the fact is, our food system has been weaponized and taken over by some bad forces. And then our pharma and healthcare companies are silent on that, but then are just profiting. And everyone's getting sicker.
It's so sad. I mean, instead of having kids wake up in the morning and eat like farm fresh eggs, right? Eggs and something healthy for breakfast, right? Instead, the advertising and big government has partnered to tell us to eat breakfast cereals, which is one of the worst things you can possibly eat as a human being, right? Processed grain breakfast cereals, like eat crap breakfast cereals. Your kid is hungry then 1 hour after getting to school. Is there any wonder why? Because it's empty, awful calories. They're getting an injection and they're going to keep eating this way. So instead of getting rid of this stuff in the house and actually feeding them fresh foods, we're injecting our kids and they're continuing to eat this seed oil based garbage.
Yeah, and I come from I'm a conservative, and I believe in individual choice. But I think these companies have hijacked the idea of individual responsibility, because it's not personal responsibility that 5-year-olds now are obese at an increasing rate, right? There's something rigged going on. And I think you make a great point about the studies telling people to eat, Fruit Loops over eggs right now. That gets into being a consultant for Food and Pharma earlier. And I actually saw that, we talked about, and I've tweeted about how they've weaponized civil rights groups, the NAACP, literally transactionally to call opponents of Coke spending and food stamps, which is ridiculous, racist. They've weaponized think tanks, conservative and left-leaning think tanks, to produce fake studies. But the most shocking thing is what they do with universities. And I still think this is not fully realized by most people. When a new study comes out and says a peer-reviewed study funded by the NIH from a top research university, that's pretty unimpeachable. But what I saw working for Coke and Pharma is that university research teams were essentially PR operations for special interests. You obviously have that with pharma. 80% of NIH grants go to researchers for pharma drugs that have a direct conflict of interest with the drug they're studying. From opioids on down, it's just a complete scandal. But it also happens with food. So you mentioned, the disastrous 1990s food pyramid, which recommended more sugar, more carbs, was founded on research from Harvard that was paid for by the sugar industry. But now the updated guidance, the preeminent NIH tough study that the NIH funded millions of dollars, also funded by food companies, literally says that Lucky Charms are 3 times healthier than eggs, that Honey Nut Cheerios are 3 times more healthier than a piece of organic beef. I mean, this is crazy, but it would be funny if that didn't then filter into our schools. And then, of course, the American Academy of Pediatrics, which credentials pediatricians. This is not a fringe group. This is a group that every parent in the country is told by the medical community to listen to for their child's advice. They are a fully owned subsidiary of pharma. It's right on their website. You can go right on their website. You can see their funders. It's all pharma. And they have shamefully this week, instead of telling parents and kids and guiding them and guiding public policy to fix this broken food system, they're telling 12-year-olds that they should get a lifelong injectable.
It's unbelievable. You were, as I mentioned at the beginning, you were in the room where it happened. You were watching Coke. You were watching, as a consultant, you were seeing how they were lobbying Congress to make sure that these things were included in the food stamps program, and how they would lobby and make sure that money was going and funneling into these different studies, so that the very studies that they were funding were the ones coming back supporting that they would get grants and money inside of the government. And it's unbelievable. Can you talk a little bit about that Koch angle on this story?
Yeah, the playbook is weaponizing institutions of trust, right? And this is very instructive, right? Food stamps, whether we could agree with the logic of that program or not, it's a $110 billion government program that 15% of Americans rely on for nutrition, right? And the number one item purchased on food stamps is soda, and 10% of all food stamp funding is sugary drinks, which are diabetes bombs. An American child is eating over 100 times more sugar than they did 100 years ago, which is obviously leading to this disaster on obesity. 80%, as we know all the stats, but 80% of American adults are overweight or obese. And then kids are really on the chopping block. So clearly ridiculous in a government nutrition program to have the number one item be sugary drinks, and 70% of funding going to processed food, which is just crazy, right? So Koch wanted to keep it that way. They weaponized institutions of trust. What was shocking to me, looking back, and now I'm devoting my life to fix this, is working with the NAACP, the most celebrated civil rights group in the United States. It's very transactional. The conversations are shockingly transactional. They say the quiet part out loud. It's, we're going to give you millions of dollars, and the NAACP will call parents who are concerned about their kids eating 100 times more sugar than they did 100 years ago racist. DC is a swamp, as we all know, but it was shocking to me, being a pretty ideological kid growing up, interning at the Heritage Foundation in college, how you just go into these think tanks and buy studies. Interestingly, I also saw organizations pay conservative think tanks to label things as not a tax. These think tanks are actually able to be paid to say that a tax isn't a tax. So you're actually able to go both ways. In this case, obviously it was actually paying for PR from the conservative, to say, oh, this is an infringement on freedom, even though I don't think it's freedom for the government to be paying $10 billion for lower income children to drink sugary drinks, which immediately gives them diabetes. And then universities. I mean, we have to be skeptical of every single peer-reviewed study. We have to be asking why. You can make a study say anything. You can ask any question. And the corporate interests, particularly pharma and the processed food companies, are dictating what questions are asked. A stat that I think really pops out to me is processed food companies in the United States spend 11 times more on nutritional research than the NIH. And the NIH itself is very corrupted too.
That's unbelievable. So Koch lobbies the NAACP to label the tax on soda as racist. They lobby to make sure they lobby to make sure that soda is included in the food stamps program, and then it's unbelievable. 10% of the food stamps.
And then 10 years later, as obesity is skyrocketing, now there's a massive push funded by the media and the news media in the United States, which relies on pharma ad dollars, to get the American taxpayer to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to subsidize obesity injections instead of thinking about the incentives of our food system. I think it's a first order issue. I'm really glad the left has been on this issue, nutrition, but the right's really waking up. I mean, looking at male sperm count going down 50% and what's happening in this country, it's a first order issue. Our precious human capital is being destroyed.
I want to get you out of here on this, and because I think you're right about that. When I was in Philadelphia as a news anchor for Good Day Philadelphia many moons ago, I remember the soda tax. I remember the discussions about the big soda tax and all of this, and there is that conservative side of me, of course, that's like, government, stay away. I don't drink soda. I used to be addicted to it in college. I don't touch it anymore. I haven't had one in, 20 years or longer, because I know what it does to the body. But it's my choice, right? It's my choice. But I get that side of it. I get that conservative side of it. But then when you literally have these corporations who are weaponizing it, and so it in many ways, the patient, the people are taken out of the equation. They don't get to make the same sort of choices anymore. They're forced into this, right? I mean, it's the conservative piece of this is kind of like the tricky part of this, isn't it?
Well, to me, it's clear now. Let's not even talk about taxes. Let's leave that off the table, because I agree. I don't like taxes either as a public policy instrument. Let's just look at grain subsidies, grain and corn subsidies. It's tens of billions of dollars a year. And the corn goes into high fructose corn syrup. And we don't need to get too into the science, but high fructose corn syrup is different than even table sugar. Fructose shuts off hunger signals. So all of our food, fructose didn't really exist until the 1970s. All of our food has been weaponized with fructose, a specific kind of sugar that literally makes you less hungry. It's in fruit for bears to, load up to hibernate. It literally, like evolutionarily, fructose shuts off the hunger signals. So our food's been weaponized with fructose that we subsidize. We have government programs that are rigged. So forget taxes. We're just paying tens of billions of dollars of subsidies and handouts for the American people to get more addicted to sugar. And then, of course, the downstream effects of that are trillions of dollars of healthcare costs. So I couldn't think of a less conservative policy. So it's grain subsidies, it's reforming food stamps, and we got to think about healthcare. Our company, and what I really like is the HSA FSA instrument, which gives consumers choice. It's like a choice account, and you can actually use that to buy healthy food in certain ways and exercise to stay healthy, which is where healthcare policy needs to go. So I actually think there's some bipartisan. It's like, let's take away the crony capitalism. Let's start with that. And we should all agree on that because our kids are on the chopping block right now.
Yeah. And then corn syrup and ethanol and now we're being forced to drive with this stuff in our cars.
And the last thing I just say is Bill Ackman, the famous hedge fund manager, retweeted what I wrote recently and said, class action like the cigarette companies. I think that's another potentially free market solution as well, because these companies have knowingly wrought damage on the American people. And I think that's another avenue. There's also bipartisan congressional investigation interest, which I'm hearing several Congress people have actually DM'd me. There's, I think, a real appetite and grassroots hunger to hold these companies accountable, which I think is appropriate.
I want to get you out of here on this question. I know I said I was going to get you out a second ago, but on Michelle Obama, okay? I don't care where your politics are, not you personally, but the audience here, where they come down on the Obamas and all of that. But Michelle Obama, when she became First Lady, one of the programs that she wanted to put in place was eating healthier, right? And there was a lot of pushback against that. And then it shifted. And the reports are because of the money and the lobbyists that got angry with her for saying eat healthier. Instead, then it shifted to just go out in your garden and move more. Move more and garden, and it got away from the healthy eating. You were in Washington at the time, I believe.
Yeah.
So was that part of this machine that got her to stop talking about healthy eating?
Big time. So the key thing to understand is 78% of U.S. states, the largest employer is either a hospital company or Walmart or the largest food seller in the United States. So Walmart gave her program, came in, muscled in, gave her program tens of millions of dollars, a ton of money, and basically said, let's focus more on exercise. Let's focus more on farming. Let's get away from food. Any group that talks, exercise is vital, but any group that's saying the obesity crisis because of exercise is being bought off by food, it's a talking point. I think there was a good effort, right? It was eventually bought off and she went the wrong way. But it should be the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense talking about this issue. I think it's around 20% or less of 21-year-olds right now in America are even eligible. Well, they're lowering the standards, but based on previous standards, we're even eligible to join the military. We have an absolute human capital crisis in this country. It needs to be the Secretary of the Treasury, the Secretary of Defense, and the President of the United States. Our rigged food system is a first-order issue, and then pharma and hospitals are just profiting, and it's going to take our country bankrupt.
Yeah, we're watching it in action. Callie Means, I appreciate your work. Thank you for being out there on the ramparts on this issue. I'd love to have you back and do a really deeper dive on your history of Coke against in the Coke battle and all of that. So I know you're busy. I know you've got congressmen blowing you up, and that's good. That's a good thing.
The fact that they're blowing me up says there's not a lot of information.
See?
The fact that they're blowing me up says that there's. Yeah, there we go. It's it's an honor to be able to help. This is a first order issue, and we should be concerned about our kids here. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Callie. We really appreciate you joining us. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unbelievable. It's unbelievable too. You think about the Michelle Obama piece of that, right? And Walmart sending all of this money. But it is, and when you see the seed oils, when you see that when we switch to low fat and processed food, that we see an explosion of obesity and diabetes and disease in this country, and they want us to be sick. They want to control it. They want us to be sick to go on these medications.
It's awful. And sometimes
I've always found Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I want to hear what you have.
Oh, I was just going to say, I've always found it really interesting that as a healthy alternative to soda, they'll push juice, and so you see that really in young kids. Where they're just like, juice, apple juice and orange juice. It's literally the same thing. It's just like a fructose bullet to the pancreas, and they're both exactly the same in how your body treats it. One is not more healthy than the other. Fruit is more healthy than soda, but fruit juice is not.
Or as we've talked here before, David and I too, about the food pyramid, right? The joke of the food pyramid.
Yes.
And it's like, and Callie just talked about that, right? Which is the disaster that the food pyramid. And then you had the fact that you have ketchup is considered a vegetable.
Yes.
When it literally has sugar inside of it, which is a poison. Sugar hits the body the same way that rat poison does.
Yeah.
And look it up. You can actually study that about what sugar does to the body. It's the same thing as hits the body the same way that rat poison does.
I once went into a Cracker Barrel and the waitress said, the vegetable of the day is brown rice. And I was like, and she goes, it's debatable, I know, and I was like, I don't think it is.
I don't think there is any debate.
I don't think that's debatable. You like that?
She's vegetable of the day is bread.
But it is covered in a fattening mushroom cream sauce. So does that take it?
Yeah, and the way she said it, like you knew that people had been giving her stuff all day about it.
Yeah.
She's like, I have to say it.
The vegetable of the day is
brown rice.
Brown rice.
Yeah.
Is high fructose corn syrup.
I wonder if you could, if you got a story for me like that. I like it. I want to hear it.
But maybe we've got over 40,000 people watching right now on this show. Can we make a commitment, all of us, at the beginning of this year, like to pay attention to all of those television commercials that are being served up to you? None of them are good, right? I mean, if we can go back to where we were as a farming culture, back with eggs and having fresh meats, and away from this processed system, away from these seed oils, away from all of this stuff, we might, start to eliminate cancer. We might start to drop weight dramatically, eliminate diabetes. And so, I think the time is now to maybe say enough is enough of these big corporations and big pharma running the show.
Yes.
But we'll see more.
Can I throw a quick anecdote in here? Like from when I first moved to Portland, it was like within like the first couple of weeks I moved to Portland, we ran into, it was like me and my now ex-wife, we ran into this couple that had, I think their kid was about 6, and his teeth were black, like rotted kind of black. And so after we kind of like talked with these people a bit, because we ran into on the street, I asked my ex-wife, I was like, what's up with his teeth? And it's like, I've asked him. They said, he just loves his soda. He just can't get enough of it. And and I'm like, I just lost it. I absolutely lost it. And I was like, this kid can't make his own decisions like that.
Yeah.
And they're just that's what he wants to drink. We're just giving him the freedom.
That's a thing in like West Virginia and places like that where they really like, that's all kids drink is soda. They have really bad teeth problems because of soda. Mountain Dew specifically.
Yeah. Yeah.
I used to live in Bluefield, West Virginia, and I used to watch that. I mean, it was like there was an addiction to Mountain Dew. So
I've seen that too. Soda in the baby bottle, for toddlers and stuff. And yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, you think, that goes straight to the teeth. I mean, you try to set your kids up for success and, like set them up to make good choices on their own. And there was a study that I read when our kids were toddlers that showed that kids who were given cereal, specifically sugary cereal for breakfast, when they were then later offered a variety of yogurts, they always chose the yogurt with the same sugar content as the cereal that they were fed every day, which shows that you are training your kids when you give them these sugary foods towards a sugary palate. And it makes their lives harder. Then they're not able to eat more bitter foods that are good for you. So, there you go with that.
Well, we've got more news to get to. We're going to talk about the Twitter files. We're going to talk about Pfizer and Moderna's censorship of people, human beings, for having an opinion about vaccines and COVID. We're going to tell you about that. We're going to do that over on Rumble, so please make sure you're over and subscribed. We've got about 20,000 people watching live on Rumble right now, so come on over. All of you YouTubers right now who are there, come on over to Rumble. It's rumble.com/redacted is the place to go. You can sign up, and we will continue the live stream there because YouTube likes to block and censor us when we talk about things that they don't like. It's a violation of their terms of service. But we will talk about this, which is private internet access. So I don't know if you guys know this, but over 30 million people have signed up for our next sponsor. And you've got to check out private internet access. Now, I use them all the time to be able to access information that is blocked from you. In fact, we just had a viewer just a few minutes ago tell us that our stuff is being blocked in Australia. We're blocked in France, right? So some of our content is blocked in different parts of the world. You need a VPN. You need private internet access, which is, and we're going to tell you how you get it actually. If you go to piavpn.com/redacted, you'll get an 83% discount. And now if you want to stream something that maybe is not available in your region, or you want to watch a piece of content that has been blocked or banned, or you want to access a news site, here's the thing. Natalie and I have to use this. We use it every day in our house. Even our kids have it on their devices. So if we want to access certain news articles that are blocked in the United States and routed, you have to route around these different countries to get access to this information. So you can get it right now. If you want to enjoy all the benefits of private internet access, now is the time to subscribe. Head to piavpn.com/redacted. You'll get an 83% discount. Seriously. That's amazing. An 83% discount. That's $2.03 a month, and you'll get 4 extra months completely free just for using our code by going to piavpn.com/redacted for a truly private digital life. Once again, piavpn.com/redacted. Check them out right now, and so you can see everything that you need to see on the internet without being censored and blocked. So thanks to them for supporting the show. All right, everyone, we're going to move over to Rumble now. It's time to go over to Rumble. So by all of our YouTubers, come on over and be a part of our community. Rumble.com/redacted. Adios.